Welcome back to a special edition of Contacts today. We are joined by former player of mine way back in the first year of my coaching, Kevin Christensen, who is the Associate Athletic Director at Sonoma Academy. And I'm not going to say more importantly, but I will. His collegiate head coach, Pat Fuscaldo. And we are going to talk about coaching, but we're also going to dive into Kevin's book called Bench Rules and talk about how that came about and how it can serve all of us in the coaching profession. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Clemo. It's really, for me, it's an honor to be here with not only my high school coach, but my college coach. Both of you were just tremendous role models for me and helped guide me when I was just a young man coming up and helped me to pursue and reach for my goals and dreams in college basketball. And both of you were a big part of that. So it's really exciting to be here with both of you.
Yeah, I feel the same way. To be with you guys is a great honor for me. To be back talking about basketball, something I've missed in the last year and a half of my retirement.
Awesome. Well, let's get in and talk about it, shall we? So we're going to do a little background in here for the audience before we dive into this discussion about the book. So let's start with the most veteran coach in the room and ask, Coach, can you take us through your background as a coach? How'd you end up in coaching, the process for you, getting into this profession and where it took you, what the journey was like and what you're doing now?
Well, I lost basketball at an early age. I was 20 years old. And I got hurt at Eastern Connecticut State. They told me I'd never play again. I didn't believe them. I went back to my hometown, took a year off, tried to make a comeback, couldn't do it, and sort of was lost without basketball because I was only 20 and I was working construction. And I ended up coming out here, California, to really open up a home for special need kids, because my buddy and I were special education, and we were working with autistic kids and severely handicapped kids was the word that we used back then. I know you don't use that word anymore. I started taking classes at San Francisco State, and one day I was walking by the gym. It was the fall of '79. I heard the team practicing, and I just knew something was missing in my life. And fate would had it. My buddy told me to take a motor class at San Francisco State, and Alan Abraham was the wrestling coach. And I was a little older. I was 23 at the time, and I had never wanted to coach. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to work with kids. And he took a liking to me. And one day he said to me, he looked me right in the face. He said, "You'd make a good coach." And I didn't really think about it. Next thing I know, he introduced me to Lyle Damon, who was the head coach at San Francisco State. Next fall, 1980, I had a whistle in my hand, a clipboard in my other hand, and I was coaching the JVs. After the first year, I was working with a guy named Jerry Shilge, who knew more about basketball but didn't know much about people. His nickname was Bongo Jerry because he was a professional bongo player, and he used to travel all over the world. Actually, he was killed in Mexico in a car crash playing the bongos. So Lyle, he offered me the head JV coach the next year. Jerry left, went to San Francisco City College with Brad Dugan, and as fate would had it, they canceled all the JV programs. So here I am walking around, and Lyle goes on sabbatical, and a guy named Kevin Wilson takes over the program, and he hires me. Long story short, I have 3 good years at San Francisco State, win the West region, losing the quarterfinals back in the day. I'm sitting in the office. The head coach got a job at Chapman College. Gary Truesdale was the other assistant, got a job at USF, and the phone rang. It was Bill Berry. Wanted to talk to Kevin about scheduling. I had to tell him that Kevin left. He goes, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He goes, "Come down, work my camp." So I went down there. I worked with Bill for a year, which was amazing at San Jose State with the Spartans. It was a 1-year deal. He only kept his GAs around, which was stupid because it took 2 years to graduate. Pete Pontac took me in. I stayed with Pete 4 out of 5 years and won about 129 games, lost about 21 games, won a lot of championships. Had a stint at USF with Jim Bervelli for a year, which was amazing. But Jim wasn't teaching what I wanted, and people thought I was crazy. I went back to Skyline, and I wanted to learn an up-tempo system, and Pete had it. Then the Notre Dame job opened up in Belmont, and I was late. I called down there. It was a part-time job, paid $9,500, which I thought was, hitting the lottery. And I went for it. I got it. Was there 3 years. Had a great staff. I had great people working under me. Rodney Tension, who went on to be the head coach of Loyola Marymount. Jerry Freitas, who went on to be run his own recruiting service. Blake Sparing, who's now the head coach at Monterey Junior College. And the Sonoma State job opened up in '94. I applied for it. I got it, and I was there for 26 years. And that's when I had the good fortune of coaching Kevin.
Thank you so much for that background. And so many names that you ran into, and we could have a whole different podcast episode on what you learned at each one of those stops. Kev, what about you?
Well, for me, I think it's important that I start a little bit with my background as a player. As you said, I played for you in high school. Coach Climo was so young that I remember when I was a senior at 18 years old, he had was bragging to some people in the stands after a game that he was finally old enough to rent a car. And so we go a ways back. So at El Camino High School in Sacramento, Coach Climo took over when I was a junior, and really you helped guide me towards fulfilling my dreams of playing college basketball. As a high school player, I ended up my senior year for you, Climo, I was the leading scorer on the team. We weren't a great team. I think we were around 500. But from there, you had the wisdom and guidance to push me off to a 4-year college where I could develop in a system. And that happened to be at Sonoma State, where I was recruited walk-on. We'll dive into my time at Sonoma State, I'm sure, as this podcast goes on. But needless to say, I started pretty much from the last player on the bench. Even for my first year was a redshirt year. I knew I was going to redshirt that first year going in for Coach Fuscaldo. And it was a development year. But from there, from the last player on the bench to having the fortune my senior year of being in the starting lineup and helping contribute to a conference championship team, the first one that Sonoma State had. And so after that, I assisted for Coach Fuscaldo for a season as a grad assistant, which was just an eye-opening experience for me and showed me how much work there is in coaching and what it takes. And so after that year, Coach Fuscaldo actually, again, just helping me in my career and my life, hooked me up to go play in Vienna, Austria for a season. So I got to play professionally for a year, which was an awesome experience. Met so many great people, got to live in Vienna for the season. But what that showed me was that I was ready to stop playing and to continue my coaching career. So came back to the States, and I helped assist for the rest of the season with Coach Fuscaldo. And then after that, had the good fortune through my connections with Sonoma State to land a job at Sonoma Academy, which is an independent school in Santa Rosa, which is where I am now. I'm in my 14th year. I've coached the varsity boys and the varsity girls teams here at Sonoma Academy. In fact, for 5 seasons, I coached both at the same time, which was an exhausting experience, but a very rewarding one as well. So here I am now at Sonoma Academy, and I'm just down the road from Sonoma State University. So I stay in touch with Coach Fuscaldo and Coach Rich Shaywitz, who's the head coach there now, and just love being around the game and love continuing to help athletes with the game of basketball.
Well, thank you both for that. I think I remember the moment when I said that to the crowd. I joked that was the last age-based rite of passage, turning 25 so you could actually rent a car. But let's talk about your description there of being an athlete and what led you to write this book, Bench Rules, A Guide to Success on and Off the Bench, which I have obviously given to many of my players over the years and many of my coaches here at the school as a way to help them try to have some difficult conversations and try to help athletes stay engaged. And I think you were the epitome of that in trying to put the team, first while still trying to work towards your goals. So what I'd love to do, and part of the reason we have both of you here, is to talk about your stories in the book, but also give Coach an opportunity to give his point of view on these stories, because obviously, right, all 3 of us are going to be here on the podcast today, and we're all going to walk away with a different narrative. So this is a great opportunity to talk both about hey, here's what the experience was like for me. Coach, what was that like for you? So if we can, and the way the book is set up is it's thematic through some chapters, and I'm just going to pull out a few things that I think will serve the audience and anyone that's coaching, or hell, any players that might be listening here. And so you talk a lot about believing in yourself, and that's a major theme that comes up. And if you don't mind, give us a little bit of background on how the book came to be, and then we'll circle back to this idea of belief and what that means for you and why that was not a starting place, but a pretty substantial part of the book.
Sure. Well, thank you. So I mentioned that I was an assistant after I got done playing for Coach Fuscaldo. And in that experience, and even a couple of years after that experience, and just staying in touch with the team and talking to some of the guys on the team, I realized that a lot of the guys on the Sonoma State men's basketball team were having some of the same issues I had, like you said from the book, with the confidence and believing in yourself and figuring out ways that you can contribute to the team without even playing a minute on the court. And these are experiences that I had, and I felt that it was that I had to share that with them. And so I put together this book, and it wasn't even a book at first. It was just ideas of how to help the Sonoma State players. So I put it together over, a year and a half. It's 12 to 18 month period. Just organizing my thoughts, thinking about my experience and how they might be able to relate to it, and keeping it as simple as possible. The book is just over 100 pages. Each chapter, like you said, touches on a different theme of ways that you can contribute to your team in different ways. And again, the book, the way I use it, and I know other coaches use it too, is some coaches use it with their whole team. The Chico State women, for example, the last few years, have used it as a whole book. Some give it to players chapter by chapter, which is something I've done in the past as well. So I had this book, and I shared it with a few people that are really close to me, like Coach Fuscaldo, like you, Coach Climo. Steve Ball, who's the head coach at Napa Valley College, was the first one who really got back to me. He read it in less than 24 hours and said to me, you need to make this available for my guys. You need to make this available for players outside of Sonoma State. And so that's why I threw it on Amazon. Had my good friend, who's an All-American at SSU with me, he's now the head coach of San Francisco State, Vincent Glima, helped me. He wrote the foreword for the book. He helped with the design of it all. And again, it's had tremendous impact on a lot of people. It's been 10 years now since I actually wrote it. And I mean, it's been used in 7 different countries. I had basketball clubs in Holland that were using it that contacted me about it. It was randomly named Book of the Month by an Argentinian basketball website. So the reach of it's been incredible because I don't promote it. It's just all word of mouth.
Well, hell, I mean, maybe that's the secret to becoming the Book of the Month in Argentina. Who knows?
Yeah.
But let's do this. And I think it's chapter 2, chapter 3, believe in yourself. And it talks about the transition of going from high school to college, the shock and awe of that experience, what that can do to your confidence, coupled with going from, as you said, being the leading scorer your senior year for me. Not only that, where we ran every single play, every time down the court to get you the ball, to being what you described as a recruited walk-on, which you left out. I had to call Rich and say, look, I got a guy. You have to take this guy. I promise you it will work out, because we were off the radar. And it was like, hey, how do we figure out how to get this guy a shot? And then you get there and it's like, yo, you're a red shirt. Here's what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, Climo, to give people an idea of when this time period was, I graduated high school in 2001. I think there was maybe one AAU team in Sacramento that I knew about. Mm-hmm. And so you had the wisdom to take our high school team to the shoe tournament in Las Vegas, right? Which was a great experience, but we got our butts handed to us a little bit there. And so, yeah, so like you said, I went back and watched some old film that I had of my high school play. And yeah, you said every play. So I'd give the ball up. I'd be running off a double screen on the weak side. I'd run off a stagger screen and then another double. I mean, you had me running all over the court just trying to get the ball. And it was a fun experience. But then I go to Sonoma State, and like you said, I'm a recruited walk-on. So I am literally I knew I was going to redshirt. They had no plans for me to play. It was basically a tryout year, which is what you explained to me that Rich had told you. Mm-hmm. And so I got to meet Coach Fuscaldo for the first time that summer before my redshirt year. I get to Sonoma State in the fall, and there are a ton of guys going out for the team. Not only that, they were redoing the floor in the gym. I don't know if you remember this, Coach. So we had to hold our open gyms in the field house, which has one court. The wall is right next to the out of bounds line. And so I'm a freshman, and there's 3 freshmen that year. And there's so many guys that have been recruited and trying out for the team that in a 2-hour open gym, I maybe got to play in 1 game because of course winners stay on, and there's no chance my team is going to win. So I go from every play being run for me to I can't even get in on an open gym because of the situation. And it was just a different experience. And go from that to, so I have a redshirt year, so I don't play basketball after playing basketball my entire life. I go to my freshman year, which is the second year there, and I appeared in 13 of 28 games. And I guarantee you 10 of those games were in the last 30 seconds when Coach walked down to the bench and said, "Do you want to play?" And I jumped up and ran as fast as I could to the scores table to get in. I remember one game at San Bernardino, I got in with 7 seconds left. Got the ball as soon as I could and threw up a 70-footer just to see if I could make something happen. So again, that's where I was at in those first couple years after high school. I took 30 shots on the season that year. Now, that said, I did have some key moments where I was able to contribute in games and be the difference, but those moments were few and far between.
Coach, what do you remember about that year?
Nothing. Are you kidding? I just remember with Kevin, in regards to Kevin, we were rebuilding. And I think 2002, we went to the region, Kev. Was that your freshman year?
My freshman year, yeah, when I was my first year playing, correct.
Playing. So the year before he got there, we were rebuilding. That's why when Rich came to me and said, "Hey, Climo said we got to keep this kid," I said, "Well, okay, let's take him." And he walked in, and I wasn't very impressed with him, except he had pretty blue eyes, and that I remember that they struck me as he looked me right in the eye, when I met him, and I said, okay, I never thought we weren't going to keep him. I just didn't know where we were going to be able to fit him in, and the memories I have of him going in the game were some of the fondest memories I've had in my coaching career. Mm-hmm. Because he went in, and what he was doing in those 3 years, and I don't think he knew he was doing this, was he was really laying the platform for identity. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were a team, we were a really family oriented team. Steve, we mentioned Steve Ball. Steve Ball was the first Kevin Christensen, but he was a great teammate. And then Kevin Christensen came along and became the epitome of what a teammate should be. Right. So, as we progressed and as he started getting more and more time and able to compete at that level at all aspects of the game, which he had problems with, and I'm sure he's going to talk about that in a second. But what Kevin was doing was there's 4 things I write on the board every day, 30 years of head coach. The last thing, what is it, Kevin? What are the last 3 things I end up? Play hard,
play smart, play together, have fun.
Have fun. Okay. And we were doing that, but we weren't doing it collectively as a team. And when it came time to plug Kevin in, that's when the team came together. Mm-hmm. And it was that journey, those 3 years, that it may have only been one great year for him, but it was more than that for me, because it was I knew that he was something special. And he showed me his redshirt year. Mm-hmm. When he had something going on, and I said, "You need to be at practice tomorrow." He goes, "Oh." I said, "If you don't come to practice, those guys will not respect you." And the 18-year-old kid showed up that morning with everything on his plate. He came to practice that morning, practiced great, and he took care of business. And I said, that's his first step to becoming the person, the player, the man I needed him to be.
Awesome. Appreciate that,
Coach. Yeah, well, and I was just going to touch on that. And that's the thing that, again, I was lucky enough to have both of you to talk to, not only as coaches, but as mentors, to help me with any kind of personal issue I might be facing. And that's what good coaches do. They don't just affect you in the gym and on the court, but off the court as well. But another story I like to tell about that freshman year, about how my confidence is challenged that first year. So I got two great stories for you guys. The first one was, I don't know if you remember, Coach, against San Bernardino at home. I got in the game and I immediately just made a hesitation move and got by one of their defenders, and their coach just blew up on the sideline. And their coach immediately subbed him out of the game and told him that if he couldn't guard me, I think he either said Oompa Loompa or Roly Poly or something like that, then he had no chance of guarding anybody. And he sat him for the rest of the game. So that was one story that I was told. I was like, wow, well, that's, that kind of hurts a little bit, but I'm glad I did something positive on the court. But just those examples of not only other people doubting me, which are something that I constantly face. So I had to look inside myself to know that I can do good things on the court. I'm being challenged every day in practice. I can't even dribble the ball across half court against the guys in practice. I'm turning it over every time. And so I had to work on that and develop that. So, I mean, if I can't get the ball across half court, how am I ever going to play in a game? Right. And so, my second year, I get in a game. We're playing at Dominican, which is a Division III school at the time. And I thought I played really well. We ended up losing in overtime, but I thought I played really well. And then the next day at practice, coach lines us up on the baseline and has us step out one by one while he tells us basically how he feels about us as a player. And so coach told me that
very constructive criticism.
Yeah, no, it was no, listen, he told me that I probably couldn't guard his mother because she's 70. She's still young and spry at the time. And I probably would never be able to play for him because of my inability to guard. And I'm not going to lie, like it hurt to hear that, but at the same time, he was right. Like I wasn't ready to play. Like I had a good game offensively. I hit a couple shots, but I went back and looked at the film. I couldn't stay in front of the guy who I was guarding. How was I ever going to play in a game? He was right. If I couldn't at least push my guy to the sideline or be able to push him to our help in our defensive system. So though while that hurt, I needed to listen to what he was saying because he was helping me, he was coaching me, he was challenging me in that time. And so I use that as motivation instead of using it and looking at it negatively.
Coach, thoughts on that? If you remember either of those moments and what buttons you were hoping to push with Kevin to get him to become who you knew he could be.
Going back to San Bernardino, Kevin didn't know this, but Jeff Oliver, from that time on, when Kevin beat his guy, put a bounty on Kevin's head. Anybody guarding him who gave up a basket was coming out of the game from the rest of his career. And it was fitting that we captured the CCA title on that court with him trying to stop Kevin.
4 years later, I hit a career high 6 threes that night.
And he did have a nickname for him. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Second, what Kevin gave us was that kind of distraction because he was multi-skilled. He just wasn't quick enough. He guarded the guys. I could play him a little against Dominican because their guards weren't like the CCA guards. So that was really hard because, even as his career went on, I'd go offense, defense for him because he was our leader and I needed him on the court. But that distraction, like Bill Trumbull talked about the game where Vince Inglima talks about in the forward about him coming in. And that night we had a tournament and Bill at our dinner, Bill talked about that game. And he didn't know what to do. And Kevin presented that problem to coaches because before ball screen motion was popular, Kevin was the best ball screen guard I ever had. I mean, he wasn't very quick, but he was so smart. He was two or three steps ahead of his players and knew where the ball should go. So, and then the fact in practice, first of all, Klein, I would never say that to a player today. You'll never play for me. Take 2 steps. But I did tell him, I said, Kev, take 2 steps forward. That's how far you've come. And 4 steps was the starters. So he was 2 steps away from being a starter. And I said, and I challenged him and I thought, was I hard on him? Well, at that time, I didn't think I was. But today I would never, ever say that to a player because they couldn't take it. But I knew he needed to hear that because I knew he wasn't going anywhere. He was never going to quit. He was going to do everything he could to become that player. Right. So we had a guy named Chris Kelly who was, from Hunters Point. His nickname was Murda. Okay, he was a street guy, and he was extremely quick, extremely strong. You know, he was built like Kevin, but he was way more muscular, you know, and he was quick as hell. So I made Kevin go one-on-one with him every day. I said, Rich, every day I want Kevin to handle the ball against Chris. And sooner or later, all of a sudden you see, Chris wasn't taking the ball from him. Kevin was getting stops on him. You know, he was progressing. And so that was the first steps towards the progress, you know, the process of him moving up and keep on moving up. It didn't come easy for him, but he was there every day, you know, just, you know, like a boxer, just swinging the best he could to get where he needed to be.
Yeah, I think the takeaway here as a coach, one, is that those feedback loops are super important. And figuring out who you're dealing with as an athlete and as a coach to make sure the message is received in the spirit it is intended is really important. And had that been a different player, maybe it lands differently. Which
the thing is that he did have a good game against Dominican, but I had guys that weren't getting the message.
Yep.
So I picked the guy. I said, "What's Guy?" And I told him, I said, "He's got a heart bigger than the gym. Right. He can do this." I was really complimentary until I said to him, "But you can't guard my mother."
Yep.
And because you can't do that, you're never. And I wanted the message to be heard to all the other guys that thought they were, you know, Kevin knew he had to work, but they already thought they were there and they weren't there. So I picked the guy that could take it. Yep. And he was the guy.
No, and that's perfect because as a player, you, especially at the high school level, you don't have the emotional capacity or the emotional intelligence to understand that. And so, Kevin, what were you able to do when you talk about the next, not the next chapter, but this idea of extra work? Okay, coach is challenging me. How am I not going to prove him wrong, but receive this feedback as an opportunity rather than being a victim?
Yeah, that's great. So my plan was obviously I needed to put in extra work, which in the book I define as work outside of your normally scheduled practice. And I wanted to be intelligent about that. Always, you know, work smarter, not necessarily always work harder. And so what I did is I needed to talk to the people that I call the insiders, who are my coaches and my teammates, to figure out what is it necessarily that I need to do. I knew Coach Fuscaldo told me, obviously, I need to become a better defender, but how do I go about doing that? So the first thing I did is focus on my weaknesses, which were my lateral speed and my strength. You know, you can do that obviously in the weight room. I tried to play more one-on-one against faster guys outside of practice. One of the most important things that I did, though, is that I sat down with the assistant coach, Coach Rich Shaywitz, and I watched film. And I figured out not only film of games, but practice and figuring out how I could become a better defender. I wasn't going to become a super athletic guy overnight. It just wasn't going to happen for me. So we watched film of practice and figured out how I could be positioned better, how I could close out better, how I could push guys to help where my help was coming from. And like Coach said, it's not all athleticism, but it's also knowledge of the game and the system that you're in, which when I go back to, for coming from you, Coach Climo, having the wisdom to send me to a program I could develop in, it wasn't going to happen for me overnight. So it was a long process. And so I realized I needed to do that, focus on my weaknesses, but I also continued to try to get better with my strengths, which are shooting. I love to be in the gym. I love to play basketball. And that's why I kept showing up every day. I just love to do it. And again, later in the book, one of the themes is finding your passion for the game. And I just, still to this day, whenever I go in the gym, whether it's coaching or playing, I just love to be there. And so shooting and scoring the ball is obviously the part of the game that I love the most. So I would play shooting games. I would get shots up after practice outside of normal scheduled practice time. And one of the games I love the most is Beat the Pro, right? You get a point for every shot you make. You get, depending on how good you are, 2 to 3 points the pro gets for every shot you miss. So I would try to do that. We played a 23. I think you called it Beat Mike Climo that when I was younger. And I just continued to develop that as well. Just working on all facets of my game so that I could continue to be a better player and contribute to the team. And I knew from what Fuscaldo said, I wasn't going to contribute in games consistently right away. So I tried to find ways to contribute in practice as well.
So here's the follow-up question before I let Coach jump in on this. You are probably in the 1% of the world of athletes that received his feedback that way. I need to get better and I'm going to go do the work. So how, Coach, would you say most of the people you offer that feedback to, including everyone else that was standing there when you talked to Kev, how did they handle that, and what set Kevin apart? And as a coach, what were you able to then see as he went through this long process that really took 3 years?
Well, yeah, if you go back to that day where I was singling each player out, there's a look that I look for in a player's eyes. You know, Kevin talks about his confidence. I mean, he wasn't playing, and he was up and down. And there's maybe 3 guys that I coached at Sonoma State that had that look. Jason Gunnarsson, he looked in the eye, he gave that I'm better than you. That curse look, that like telling you what he really thinks with his eyes. Vincent Glima, Vince talked to me more with his eyes than any player I ever coached. I mean, he was always saying, "Coach, get off of me. I'm ready. We're ready." When Kevin, that day I was on him, I looked in his eyes and he was just staring at me. And that look stayed with him until he was running the team. So Kevin was the first guard I had that I'd come up to help and say, "All right, Kev, what do you want to run? What do you think we should do here?" He had a better feel than I did on the court. I was a point guard, and I needed a point guard that was that way. So getting back to your question of how many guys in the gym got that message, I'd say 10% maybe got the message that day. But I'm going to tell you this, everybody, and Kevin could attest to this, that went through the program, that stayed and finished didn't quit, no hitters, no 3 hitters for the quitters, right? Went through the program, knew, felt that way. But Kevin got it right away, because Kevin didn't want to waste any time. He wanted to be playing because he loved the game. He had the passion for the game. And you can see that in his eyes. And, you look at some guys today, why are you out here? To put the uniform on, to go and put your picture on Instagram, but Kevin wasn't that way. It was all about, it was business.
Right.
His business, he had a business approach to his passion, to his discipline that he wanted to get better at.
Yeah.
And he got it that day. And I was happy he was in practice that day, because it sent a message to his teammates. And we started winning a little bit after that.
Yep. No, I appreciate that perspective, because that's the same thing I've heard or I've seen. It's like you can offer that feedback all the time, and athletes can act on it, or they can still act, "No, I'm fine, coach. You got this wrong." So what I'd be curious about, Kev, you talk later about, as an athlete who is on the bench, who's not getting the playing time they had hoped for, that they deserve, even though, coach is out here trying to lose games because they're not trying to play the best guys, right? How do you take advantage of the opportunities that you're given? And you mentioned half of those games were probably under 30 seconds, and coach would come down and say, "Do you want to play?" Right? Which is what I do, because some people might be offended by that, but opting in, and you're absolutely sprint down, jump in, right? But how, because the other approach is, "No, I'm good," right? My ego's too big for that, right? Coach has got this wrong. Talk about what opportunities existed for you when you weren't playing, that you saw other people passing on, but you were going to take advantage of.
Yeah, so the most obvious one in a college basketball program, especially my redshirt year and my 2 years after that, was being on the scout team, basically running the other team's plays so the first and second group could get prepared for the game. Some guys would take that as an insult, and I loved it. I love to go and learn new offenses that the other team was running, try to put myself in their role. And you get a chance to play against the first team with a little bit more freedom outside of our own system. And so I always tried to do the best I could to be prepared for those opportunities, so I could help the team be prepared. I mean, I wasn't going to play much on game day, but I could help them in practice. And so I think that's a huge opportunity in practice for people. And you say, I like how you say, not playing the minutes you deserve to play. So I think this idea that I also touch on in the book is I said earlier, handling outside influences. So insiders and outsiders. So many athletes, and I'm included, have people that care for them and love them and want them to do well, but they don't necessarily give them the best advice, especially if they're a bench player. I would have a lot of people come up to me after games and say, "Oh, coach doesn't know what he's doing. You should be playing more." And I would just think to myself, that's not true. Like, I shouldn't be playing more. Like, you don't come to practice and see me get beat every day. Like, you don't see the film that I see. they're just trying, and they're just trying to be nice. They're just trying to make me feel better. But the problem is that a lot of people buy into those comments and think, yeah, you know what? Coach doesn't know what he's doing. I should be playing more. And they develop a negative attitude because of it. So, the people that I trust and I trusted were my coaches, my teammates, and just getting feedback from them. Even my parents would do it occasionally, but not bad at all. My parents knew that, and they were very supportive and helped me. My mom would be upset if I didn't play, probably more upset than I would be, but she knew better than to say anything negative, because I just wasn't going to hear it and I wasn't going to have it. And so handling and thinking about how you can get better, but also the opportunities, like you said, the scout team. And with that knowledge of the scout team, I could help the players to come off the court and be like, hey, we worked on that ball screen. Like they're gonna fake using the screen every time and go baseline. Like that's the play. So like you need to be ready for that. And just helping teammates. And teammates didn't want that sometimes. Guys come off the court, they have the coaches on them. I try to take a different approach and try to be a coach on the bench and help out. But they're also not as receptive to that at times too. So just doing what I can to help, even mentioning to one of the assistant coaches some things that I might see from the bench that maybe they didn't see or think about.
So, Coach, again, can you talk about, in hindsight, watching Kevin go through that and how he navigated those moments versus some other athletes who maybe handled it differently? And then as a coach, what it feels like when somebody is seeing these things as an opportunity and trying to do what you ask and trying to put the team first versus those that aren't, and how you receive that and handle that as a coach.
Well, the difference between Kevin and some of those guys that were at the end of the bench is that, Kevin pulled himself out and was being productive in every means to help the team. I mean, being part of the scout team as a player is different than being as part of the scout team as a redshirt. You know what I mean? I mean, he was still being as a freshman, even a sophomore, he was part of the scout team a lot. So that could diminish a person's confidence right off the bat. Oh, here I am, I'm working my butt off, but he never did that. And I had guys that turned out to be great bench guys and that they read his book and that were contributed. But with Kevin, he'll tell you this, I was one of the guys that would go down to the end of the bench and sit next to him and talk to him while the game was going on, because he always had a good perspective from the end of the bench because he was a point guard. And I kind of aspired to my point guards because he always had good feedback and positive feedback. Now, where I learned that was when I was in high school, I got sat for 8 games in my senior year. And I thought the coach was crazy because he didn't want me throwing behind the back passes. It was my best pass. So we're in a game, we're down by 30. It was 4 minutes and 40 seconds to go. I still have the clipping, the newspaper clipping. And he called my name. And I just said to I said, he better not put me in now. He called my name. And unlike Kevin, I stood up, I strolled, I strutted. I didn't even look at him. I went in the game. I threw 3 behind the back passes. We scored 12 points in the 4 minutes, more points than they scored the whole game. And I thought, like Kevin, I'm back in action. Next game, here I am on the bench again. So I never forgot that, but it wasn't that made me want to go. It was that said, I can't lose this kid, because my coach actually lost me because I didn't have the attitude, Kevin. I thought I should be playing. And, even though he thought he should be playing, he did what he had to do to get there. And you don't find that. I'm sorry. I can go through a lot of guys that end up being great people that didn't get a lot of minutes for me and went on, and most of them went on to coach. Steve Ball, we had 6 head junior college coaches in California at one time, Division I coaches, but Kevin just had that drive. He had that, he had it, whatever it is to make a player who he is and what he can do. And he was just determined to keep plugging and coming and going hard and being more productive in his game, being smarter in his game, because he was never going to wow anybody with athleticism. Kevin, he couldn't keep the guy in front of him, but he was the best off the ball defender I've ever had, because he made more steals along the baseline and help side than anybody we ever had. He'd come up, I said, I know Kevin's going to make a play here, boom. And the next thing you know, he couldn't guard his guy. This guy didn't have the ball, but he'd make a steal and he'd help us win the game.
Well, that's because I wasn't going to step over and take a charge, so I had to be there early.
Well, I'll also say this. Rich has given me crap for years about how I don't teach my guys to play defense, and you've coached many of them, Coach Fuscaldo. But all my dudes were great help defenders, and one of them was a great charge taker. And Will also.
Yeah, that's true.
Best. I mean, he was like Kevin. he had no interest in keeping the guy in front of him. He didn't really care because he was going to shoot a three. In fact, the San Bernardino coach, the same one that put a bounty on his, had a no touch on Will one day in one of our games. Will crossed half court, one dribble across half, pulled it, shot it, drained it. Oliver yanks the kid out, goes, I told you. The kid goes, Coach, he shot it from half court. What do you want me to do? And you can hear him cursing and echoing. And Will was another great help defender and a great charge taker.
Well, so that's because, Coach, again, we were going to get 3 at one end and give up 2 at the other. I mean, wasn't a math major, but that's a +1.
Hey, they learned a few things from me when they played for me.
Clement, let me just touch on one story that I have to tell about that, and that, being a bench player. And the thing that I always talk to my teams about too is when you're on the bench, whether you have a chance to play or not, you have to stay mentally checked into the game. So probably my favorite story from when I was a freshman was at UC Davis. So I grew up in Sacramento, obviously playing for Climo. UC Davis, the Aggies was a terrific school. They were transitioning from Division II to Division I. Probably would have been my dream school to go to, but I ended up at Sonoma State and it worked out great for me. But so we're at UC Davis, and it's my freshman year, and I hadn't played all night. I was a redshirt the year before. All my friends and family are in the stands. Climo, you're up there with the group of El Camino guys, and it's a close game, back and forth. And I think it was like 5 minutes left, Coach told me to go in the game, and it's a tie game. And I'm thinking, I didn't have time to think. I just ran to the scorer's table. Later on, I thought, what was he thinking? But so Coach puts me in the game, and we go back and forth a couple times. I'm running the offense, and with less than 30 seconds left, the ball's in my hands. I try to throw it inside, and the passing lane gets taken away, and the shot clock's at 2. I have no choice. I raise up, shoot a shot from the free throw line area, and as the ball's in the air, the shot clock buzzer goes off. Ball goes through the net, and just silence in the gym, except for the Sacramento fan section up top, just going crazy. We go down, we get a stop. Somehow the ball comes to me off the missed shot. I never got rebounds. The ball comes to me. I get the rebound to end the game, to win it. And probably one of the greatest moments of my basketball career there. And I scored 2 points, right? But all of it because I stayed mentally checked in the game. I knew what we were running on offense. I knew what they were doing on defense. I knew who on our team was having a good game. I knew we had to get the ball inside more too. We had 6'10" and 6'9" down low. We had to get them the ball a little bit more. So the next game after that, though, I don't play, right? After going in, making a difference. And I would admit, like we're talking about all these positive things I did, but I was negative too. I had negative thoughts just like anybody else. It's just, I think I was able to overcome those a little bit quicker and move on from them and maintain a positive attitude. But Coach was right to not play me in those next 2 games. Like I said, I had trouble guarding. Our next 3 opponents were extremely athletic guards. I maybe got in one of those games, got blown by in 2 possessions, and I was out. That game at UC Davis, they were in a 2-3 zone, right? Their guards weren't super fast. I could guard them. I could play against a 2-3 zone. I wasn't going to get pressured. Like, it was a perfect opportunity for me. And so while other people might look at it the other way, after I got past my anger and feeling down about it, like, I realized Coach was right, that I wasn't ready to keep playing consistent minutes, but I was super happy I got to help in that situation.
Well, and I would say this, even as your coach who was there with the Sacramento contingent, and it's my alma mater, and obviously I'm torn because I want Kev to play, but I want the Ags to win all the way up until he got in the game. And then, you make that play and you win. And I'm like, yeah, that's why he should be playing. The hell's the problem? But it's like you said, it's out of love, not rationality, not logic, right? And so how do you, and I never told you that because I knew what impact that could have, but that's my feelings, and that's how the parents are feeling. And it's like, it took you a while to get there, and I don't even know that you got there very quickly, right. But it's how, what tools do you have to offer? Even Coach, you can jump on this one, for the person that's not as emotionally intelligent as Kevin. And it's like, their parents are still in their ear. They're like, yes, why I should play. This is bullshit. Coach, I showed you what I could do. Like, what are the tools to help that kid?
Well, first of all, I didn't know you could swear on this, because that look that Kevin gave me was "fuck you." Gunny used to give it to me all the time. Vince gave it to me more than anybody. Um, with Kevin, it was easy, because he was so highly motivated. And I think with other players that maybe think they should be playing, I think you got to point out how important their role is just being on the team and what they mean to the team. And you got to try to get them to buy into that. And I've had many kids that have bought into it. And I've had kids that left the program because they thought they were better than they were. And I don't have any regrets of that. I think losing a kid as a coach is the reason why I got into coaching, was my biggest fear. I didn't want to lose anybody. I mean, I lost kids. I lost Jay. I lost Jay Flores. He didn't want to play for me. He didn't want to play with Pratt. So I called Klink at Chico and I said, hey, you got to take this guy. And Jay ended up being the player of the year. And it was like, stupid. Well, it wasn't a good combination. It wasn't a good fit with me and him. But with Kevin, I always thought it was a perfect fit. I thought he was perfect for me. I don't know if I was perfect for him, but he's what I needed, to keep the program going. And with other guys, you got to figure out what motivates them, to try to keep them interested. Like Steve Ball started the white squad, which was the second squad, and they'd come out every day, white squad, and they'd be ready to practice. So you try to figure something, give them something to hold on to, that's going to, that things are going to get better and that their game is going to progress and they're going to become players. Some people are impatient and they leave. There's nothing you can do about that.
Well, and that's what I did too. That's what I taken from Steve, is we created the bench mob, where we had an identity for our second group.
Yep.
We were going to try to challenge the first team in practice and win every chance we could. And there was days that we did, and a lot of days we didn't, but we stuck together and supported each other as, kind of a small group within the team. And it was just such a great part. It was such a great experience to be a part of that, and feel that camaraderie among the guys that really weren't going to play a huge role on game day, but understanding that some of us in the group are going to get in during the game, and we are going to determine the outcome of the game by whether we play well or not.
Yeah, Steve Ball had a chance to beat St. Mary's. To this day, I still tease him about missing the shot. When they had Big Continent, the big guy, the 7'4" guy, we had them beat. We had him dead in the water. He took the shot and he missed it, and we ended up losing the game in overtime. But going back to the Davis game again, remember what I said, that Kevin presented problems to coaches and to programs? Well, if you remember that shot, Kevin, we wanted to get the ball inside to Trevor Howell. I think, Kevin, was it Trevor Howell?
Well, him and Chris Oliver are doing a cross screen. Yeah, so
it was one of them. And when Kevin pump fake, and if you remember that, the whole defense collapsed into the paint. He's standing there, what, 15 feet, Kev?
Yeah.
15 feet. And he's like this, I'm going, shoot it. He's wide open because they didn't know what he was going to do with it. And he drained that, and he went down, got the rebound. I went, yes, and he was right. Davis had the kind of guys like Dominic. They were better than Dominic, but they had the same kind of players as that where he could play. The next time we had to go up to Chico. They were very athletic. And I had a hard time finding a place to play him. Yeah. Because the last thing I know Kevin would want to do is go in and hurt the team.
Right.
That would have been devastating for him.
Well, I got two things on that. And one is to hear you talk about Kevin now. I know for a fact that that's not how he felt during those moments. Mm-hmm. Coach loves me, this, that, and the other thing. That's all of us in life. Like, we don't always do a great job celebrating our athletes because we're always trying to help them get better. And generally that's like pointing out the ways they can improve. And so to hear that now and to go through that then, I think it's important just to point out that this is why having a constant dialogue with your coach that isn't necessarily about basketball or your sport is important for athletes to go and do and for coaches to go and do. And you also mentioned the role that you have, how to star in that role. And Kevin figured that out, whether he was on the bench, whether he was in the game, even though it makes me laugh that you had to tell him to shoot it because Kevin never saw a shot that he didn't like. But
well, it was a mid-range jumper. I don't shoot it from mid-range.
That's true. Fair enough. We were early on that. We were early adopters. But how would you say, Kevin, you took that role definition, that idea of this is what your job is, and you ran with it to survive on the bench?
Well, the first thing that we keep talking about, all of these stories, the most important thing to me is I want to win. So I'm a competitive person. Even to this day, I want to compete in different things. And that's one of the things that over the last year and a half with COVID that I've missed is just competing. But I also realized too, that if I was going to be on the end of the bench, I didn't want to be on the end of the bench on a bad team. What's that say about me? I can't get in the game on a bad team. Are you serious? So I think figuring out what my role was and embracing it. It doesn't mean I'm gonna be stuck in that role forever, but just figuring out what it was. And like I said, early on, it was scout team. Like that was my role. I mean, as a red shirt, you start with the warm-up drills with the team, you do the breakdown drills, and then they do the controlled scrimmaging, and we stand there and we don't get opportunities much to play. So just figuring out what your role is, how you can thrive in that role. Like I said, maybe you should talk to your assistant coaches and ask. And maybe you should talk to your teammates and see what you can do better. But I was just looking for every way I could to contribute to the team and to a winning team and to help us be better. That's what I want to do. I want to win.
And when you're on the bench and you're not getting in the game, and a lot of athletes think this is the only way I can help. Coach, you got to let me show what I can do. I can help us win. How did you specifically add value there? There's some things you've written about, some stories you told that were like, hey, I didn't get in the game, but this is where we contributed.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm not really sure which stories we're going for here, Climo.
Well, again, you talked about the bench mob. Coach mentioned the white squad.
Right.
You talked about, making sure that you're competing every day and trying to win, even though you're losing a lot. But how do you help the team there?
Yeah, I think it's all about your outlook and positive attitude. There's some days where, like I said, you're challenged, and it just goes back to, I think the most important lesson in the book is believe in yourself, because it's not easy to be a college basketball player, and it's not easy to be a college basketball player, especially if you're at the end of the bench, or I guess at any level, but that was my experience in college. Mm-hmm. And so I think just figuring out ways that you can continue to improve and help the team. Again, like I said, the bench mob was probably the best thing I ever did, because with the bench mob, we formed an identity, and we just felt a bond between us that we would help each other to get better, and we would challenge the first group. And the biggest challenge though with the bench mob is that you start playing well, and what happens? Coach takes a couple guys off that team and puts them with the first group. So you're like, okay, that's all right. We don't need them. Okay, we'll win without them. It's okay. We'll be okay.
Well, it also gave the blue group, they got something going here. We're not doing anything. We should be more like them,
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something that I think is important to point out, that once you had the bench mob, or you had the second group, right? Then the guys that weren't necessarily eating up the majority of the minutes, that you would get them together after introductions, right, and almost give them a secondary pep talk. What was the point of that?
Well, again, I think a lot of guys, everybody wants to start, right? Let's be honest. But on any normal basketball team, there's more people that don't start than do start. So the starters all get their names called. They get to run over and, run through the cheerleaders, and how great, everybody, again, like I said, everybody wants to be a starter and hear their name called. But getting our group together to remind them that we were going to be the difference in the game, especially at Sonoma State. We had to go 9-10 deep most nights if we were going to have a chance to play against some of the other teams that had maybe a little bit better athletes than us. And just keeping our group focused on what we're going to do. And also, so when we go back to the bench, we sit there and we're engaged in the game mentally right from the start, and not just looking up in the stands and seeing who's there and just being distracted. So I thought it was really important for us. And after I became a starter, Donald Des Hotels, one of the other guys that was a part of it, actually took that over. And it was just great to see that carry over and to see those guys continue to develop that culture.
He wasn't perfect. Okay. He had lapses, because when we went to Arizona the first night, the Mike Bibby night, we came out on the bench, and I told the officials, Tim Gabatero was a good friend of mine. I said, Timmy, you can't put my post players in foul trouble right away, or we're going to lose by 100. And sure enough, in the first 4 minutes, 2 post players picked up 2 fouls. So I turned to the bench, and I'm looking at the bench, and nobody's looking at the game. They put the cheerleaders right in front of us. Right in front of us. And I didn't notice at first. I went, oh my God. I said, hey, stay in the game. Let's go. and we ended up playing a really good game. Did you get to play the game, Kev, the first year?
Yeah. I got you would put me in. I think every time we went to play a Division I opponent, I got in eventually, whether it's 30 seconds or whatever. But yes,
And I made you stay in the court so you meet Mike Bibby too. We stood there so you can meet Mike Bibby.
Well, I think that was the night after, or the game after. So that was my senior year.
Well, that was your junior year, our first year we played.
Was that okay?
2000.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's right. All right,
yeah.
Okay, pivoting. So none of us is perfect. We all have our warts. You talked a little bit about role definition and how important that was for you. Kevin, how have you seen that play out in your own coaching career, and how have you utilized the lessons learned in bench rules and playing for coach to now use that to maybe be a little more proactive on the front end so that you're limiting the number of athletes that maybe don't get it?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, and you touched on this, is just the communication between the coach and the players. So I try to do some exercises throughout the year that, and I don't do it with every team. I get a feel for what every team needs, but I try to help the players understand from an early point in the season what their role will be, not only from my viewpoint, but from their teammates. So one of the things that we did at Sonoma State that I do here with a lot of my teams is that we have we have the players rank themselves. Okay, so we have the players rank themselves, and from 1 to 15, whatever it is. When I was on the team, it was 1 to 18, I believe. My redshirt year, they involved the redshirts as well, and the coaches compile all those rankings and they say, here's the averages. Here's 1 through 18. Doesn't matter your position. This is where you are. And that's when I saw my name up there. I think it was 16 that year, maybe 17. So not nearly where I wanted to be. But again, that's your teammates' rankings. And so you do with that what you will, but it also helps you understand, okay, this isn't the coach. This is my teammates and what my teammates who I'm competing against, where they rank me. And so I'll use that information. I don't always share it. It depends on the team. But I have individual meetings with them as well to kind of discuss where they're at and where I see them going in that season and in the future. Another great one that we do, because again, every coach I think comes across playing time issues, right? Guys want more playing time. Players want more playing time. So, and this is one that Clem, I know we've talked about, is that I have the players tell me how many minutes per game they think they should be playing, right? And so in 5 players, 32-minute high school game, you need 160 minutes total you have. And if I was going to give every player the minutes that they want, I would need 2.5 games. So again, it's just tempers expectations a little bit on playing time as well. I know, Clemma, you take that a step further, which I love to hear you talk about. But again, having those meetings with the players and helping them to understand where they're at. And again, taking these lessons from bench rules and the things that I've experienced and how they can help the team without playing in the game, and how important practice is. I mean, let's be honest, for any team, you play 20% of your obligations in basketball or games, 80% are practices. So again, that's the most important time for the team to get better and improve.
Coach, what are your thoughts on that now as a retiree and dipping your toe back in the water and looking at it from a different lens? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on how to navigate that? Everyone wants to play more. And I always joke. It's like, yeah, Kev, that's great. You want to play more. Who shouldn't be playing? That's not my problem. You figure that out. Well, it's not how it works.
Yeah. There's certain sections, maybe there's 4 sections of a season, the conditioning, practice, games, postseason, right? And right now, there's not a team in America who doesn't have a happy team. Right? Everybody's happy right now because there's no roles been defined yet. People know they're not on the one group, but they're still playing, they're still fighting. Once the games start, that's when all the problems start. Mm-hmm. And if you're not prepared for that as a coach, if you haven't been talking to your players and trying to get them ready to say, hey, listen, this is where I see you right now and into the season. I'm not a big, hey, Kevin, I'm going to meet, Justin, I'm going to meet with you at 12 o'clock today. I mean, in that way, I would go find my player and go for a walk with them, mm-hmm. or go up and just talk, just try to get them out of my office.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they come in the office and the door shuts, they're like, okay, I'm at the principal's office, you know, something, you know, I'm going to hear something I don't like. Unless they'd come in and say, Coach, I got a problem. And I say, well, is it basketball? And he says, no, it's first. And I shut the door, and it's just that player and I let them talk. So do I have any answer to that? No. I just know that you have to deal with it.
Right.
You know, you're not going to make everybody happy. And you got to tell them that, you know, I used to say to my guys, there's 7,000 students in this school, and only 16 of you came out for basketball. Mm-hmm. That means it's not easy. And if it was easy, everybody would do it. Mm-hmm. And just to be part of that 16 is a major accomplishment. And if you're not happy being part of the white squad, if you're not happy to become a distraction, that's why I became a coach, because those are the kids I wanted to save. And you can't save all. And even my mentor, Alan Abraham, goes, I said, Coach, you know, what is it? Well, how do you work with those kids? How do you keep those kids? He goes, sometimes you got to cut them loose. I go, I don't believe in that, because if somebody cut me loose, I wouldn't be standing here in front. He goes, and he said the first time I heard this phrase, he goes, those guys are coach killers. You spend more time with those guys trying to keep them on, trying to get them going the right way, and you're neglecting the rest of your team. Yeah. And then all of a sudden that made sense to me. Yeah. So, you know, if Kevin's not playing, Rich, stay on Kevin, talk to him. Cloney, so-and-so's not playing, whoever, you know, Coach Libben. You know, Coach Libben was, you know, he was with me for 4 years. Kevin knows he's got the coach that he played for in Austria. And you know, he's a Catholic guy. He was disciplined first. The kids aspired to be with him, because at least he would tell them straight out without sugarcoating it. Yep. Where, you know, a guy comes in to me, I say, he's just better. He's playing better than you right now. That's the bottom line. Well, they don't want to hear that. Well, I beat him in practice every day. Well, no, you don't. You may think you beat him in practice every day, but you don't. Keep on coming at him. And that's with me, with Chris Kelly, covering Kevin. Stay on him. Stay on him. Stay on him. Keep challenging, because if you're not challenging your players and they're not playing and you're not communicating with them, why would they stay?
Yep. No, I love that idea of find someone on the staff that can communicate with them, because it's not always us. And two, that Coach Levin was so direct and didn't sugarcoat it. I'm a big believer in clear role definition and be direct. You don't have to sugarcoat it. You also don't have to be an asshole, right? It's like, this is what you're great at. Go do this, and then we'll work on these other things. And Kevin said it earlier, right? You can star in your role while you're working towards the role that you want. And that's the key to getting the attention of the coach. And that's what Kevin was able to do. Let's look at this last piece, and then I have a few follow-up questions. Kevin, you write about, I think it's the last chapter, make it happen. You talk about, you know, the attitudinal fitness necessary. What were your 3 takeaways from that chapter that you want people who are in this position, or you want coaches to remember, so that this helps?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that it's up to you to make it happen. Like, nobody's going to just hand you what you want. You have to go and give you everything, lay out everything in bench rules, whether you just need one chapter or all of them, to continue to improve and improve your role on the team. And just to stop feeling sorry for yourself. You know, it's not, you got to stop blaming other people for your problems. Okay. I heard I was listening to a podcast on freedom of speech, and a Supreme Court justice said about one of his rulings, if your feelings are hurt, that's your problem.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that was my problem. So I had to get past that. And the other thing also is that you need to understand, coaches, and I even see this, especially now that I've been coaching the past 15 plus years, is coaches play the best players. We play the players that we think will give the team the best chance to be successful. And we don't sit players because we have any kind of personal vendetta or hidden agenda. It's our job to put the players in the necessary positions where they can succeed. And that's what we're constantly trying to do. And the information that we have is the information that we see in practices and in the games when you get into the game. So again, no one is going to hand you this. It's up to you to take the steps necessary to make it happen. You know, the famous Michael Jordan quote, some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, and others make it happen. And I always wanted to be somebody that was going to make it happen. And we're talking on here, and Coach said it, I was not perfect. Like we're portraying this glowing portrayal of me as a player. But again, I had negative moments, I had negative thoughts. But at the end of the day, I tried to turn those into positives, and I was determined that I was going to make it happen. Now, when I say make it happen, right, and I have my stats in the book. I went back and recently looked at this. Even in my senior year, when Coach put me into the starting lineup, we were 0-3. Coach put me in the starting lineup. I only averaged 8 points a game that year. Right? We're not talking about he became the best player and was averaging 20 plus. I was put into a role with really good players around me on a really good team. We had the only All-American that Sonoma State's had. We had the all-time leader in points and rebounds on the team. Okay. It was my job really to come in and help lead those guys and not mess up. And again, that's really what I tried to do.
You know, Kev, just to growing out a little bit, he wasn't perfect, but he was as perfect as a teammate as you could get. Okay. We all have our inner demons. We all have our inner talk. I play golf now, and I'm telling myself for 18 holes how much I suck playing golf. That's not what I would say to myself when I was playing basketball. But two things what I would do is, you don't want to be an asshole. I would put the kids in a circle, and I would say, there's only one asshole in this gym, point to him. And they'd all point to me. I said, now don't do as I say, don't do as I do. Number one. Number two, if I felt like there was a time when guys were starting to feel sorry for themselves, I would just walk out in the huddle and I would quote D.L. Arms. Remember that poem, Kev?
Remind me, Coach.
I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A small bird will fall cold, dead from a bough without ever feeling sorry for himself. It's one of my favorite quotes, my favorite poems. And then I look at the kid who I thought was feeling sorry for himself, and I look him right in the eye. Small bird will fall dead, frozen from a bough, without ever feeling so. Because we are the only species that has self-pity. So Kevin's right. You can control that if you want, and he did. He did a great job of doing that.
Yeah, and that's a big point, right? Control the controllable aspects of your life. And some of my best leaders have been kids that weren't in the lineup, and part of that was working with them to create a role where they could thrive. And you mentioned you'd go sit down and talk to Kevin about things that he was seeing. I had a kid played for me in the class of 2017 who was the 15th dude getting into the games, but he would actually coach the guys during timeouts. I wouldn't even go in the huddle. I'd be like, you got it. And it was a role where they respected him for what he brought to the table, even though he couldn't necessarily perform in the way in which he would like, or I would like for him to do, but those roles are super important. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier, Kevin, I don't know if you remember this, your senior year, because your junior year, I definitely didn't have this tool, but in the parent meeting, I would tell the parents, I'd be like, look, here's the difference between a parent and a coach. The coach wants the best 5 players to play. The parent wants the best 4 players and their son to play. And as long as we can understand that we have different perspectives, we're going to get along great. And I think what you said about we're trying to put the team in a position to win, and we're trying to put individual athletes in a position to be successful. Success doesn't always look like what they dreamed about, right? And that it's our job as coaches to help the kids understand how they can be successful and how they can contribute. And then to your point, Coach, if they don't want to do that, if they want to feel sorry for themselves, sometimes they have to be able to opt out. That's not what I want to do with my time. And that's okay. We're trying to create an inclusive environment where everyone can thrive, even if it's not the way that they designed the movie.
Yeah.
That his senior year, they played in a summer league, and I would watch them play. And it taught me a lot about their character and what they could do and what they couldn't do. And there would be games that year where Rich would say, Coach, we need a timeout. I know. No, they got themselves into it. Let's see them get themselves out of it. And at the end of the year, we had clinched a tie with Bakersfield for the championship. If we had won the next night because Bakersfield lost at Chico, we would win outright. So the game starts. This is for all the marbles down in San Diego. And we got stuck in the parking lot, Kev. Remember? The car broke down. We didn't.
Our All-American small forward changed the tire in the parking lot the night after San Bernardino so we could drive to San Diego.
We had to wait 2 hours for a tow truck to get out there so we get into the car because they locked the keys in the car. So we get to San Diego and the game starts and we're up 15-9 and we were kind of flat. We weren't playing that well. And my assistant, longtime assistant coach, associate head coach, Rich, said to me, Coach, maybe we should take a timeout and just settle him down. I said, Rich, don't you see what's going on here? And he goes, what? I go, this game's over. He goes, wait. I said, just watch. And we went on a 14-2 run. And with 7 minutes to go, we'd emptied the bench. And we clinched. And I said, was Kevin's process, his process from coming and leading from the bench and then being able to get on the court and be the leader that he was and lead that team. There was no doubt in my mind that we weren't going to win that game. And there was not very many times I walked on the court in my career at Sonoma State because we were always undermanned. In fact, that year was the only time I ever said to Rich and my assistants after practice, and I'm sitting there and they're talking about it, and Rich goes, Coach, you're not saying that. I said, what? He goes, what's wrong? I said, we are fucking good. We are really, and he wasn't even starting yet. Yep. I said, we had a guy named Nick Merlot that would have been the best defender. And he ended up quitting right when conditioning was over because he was having problems. Yeah. And even without him, I said, this team is special. And it was. Yeah. As soon as I put him into the lineup.
Well, that's a podcast episode for another day since we just talked about at the wedding. But Kev, what do you got to?
I was just going to say one of the most important things you touched on, and that's controlling the controllables. This is something I constantly talk to my athletes about now. And now that my own children are starting youth sports, my daughter is 10 years old playing competitive soccer. Just focusing on what you can control, your effort, your attitude. You can't control a ref's call. You can't control your coach's decision-making. You just need to focus on those things which you can control. For example, just a few weeks ago, my daughter comes off the field from a soccer game and the other team scored in the last minute to tie 1-1. And she comes off, the ref added more time than he should have. And I can't believe he did that. Wait a second, what? Again, yes, the ref may have added more time, but again, what could you have done throughout the whole game that would have made a difference? I tell my teams all the time, like we've had calls at the end of games here where it maybe decides the outcome of the game with the call. It changes from one team winning to the other team winning. But that's not what cost us the game. There's so many opportunities throughout the course of the game that you can make positive things happen. That it just doesn't come down to that one moment. Okay, but again, that's sometimes what people want to focus on because again, maybe they don't want to take the accountability for themselves and think that maybe they could have done something better.
Yeah, that's a good point because as hard as I was when I was younger with guys, if there came to the last play of the game and we didn't make the play, say Kevin missed a shot or Andrew turned the ball over, and I would just say, did you want to miss the shot? No. Okay. Well, then, what are you going to do? Did you want to turn the ball over? That play didn't define the whole game. We could have done things up until that point where we could have had a lead and we were trying to come from behind. Yep. I think that's important that you point that out to your players that, hey, it's okay to make a mistake, but don't make another mistake by sitting around moping about it. Or you make a mistake on the court and you stop playing. That's the mistake. That's the difference between failure and mistakes is, failures is one thing, but mistakes is you can control those mistakes by not making another mistake right away.
Right. Absolutely. And I would add for this, and then we could talk about getting this book into people's hands here. But, my daughter plays volleyball and she was an all-league player as a freshman. She's a junior now, and she didn't play in a game the other night. And she came home. And I talked to my wife because I didn't go to the game. I was like, what was her demeanor like on the bench? And she said she was engaged. She stayed positive. She did all that. I said, great. And it wasn't like, why did she not play? Whatever. But she came home a little bit like frustrated. And I was like, what's the problem? I didn't get into that. I was like, get better. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's that idea of what narrative do you want to tell yourself? Well, coach didn't play me because of this. Coach doesn't like, whatever it is, at the end of the day, don't wish it were easier. Get better. Use the tools that Coach Christensen here is laid out in the book, and then you can find your way into the role that you want, possibly. But you can control how hard you work at that so that you walk away feeling fulfilled. And I think that's the important takeaway. And Kev, I'd love, for you to why don't we do this off the cuff so that you're blindsided by it? But if you would like to get a copy of Bench Rules at a discounted rate, we're going to put it in the show notes. You can reach out to us directly, and we'll be able to provide some bulk copies for your team and your program so that you can hand deliver these out and get them to people who would benefit from them. How does that sound, Kev, since you weren't ready?
That sounds awesome. Like I said, over the 10 years we've done it, every year I hear about different teams using it, from college to high school, all throughout the country. And like I said, in several different countries as well. And again, I also have it listed. Do you want me to say on Amazon?
Yeah, for sure. We'll put all that in show notes.
So I also have it listed on Amazon.com. It's pretty much the cheapest that Amazon allows me to put it out. I don't make hardly anything off it. I just want the message to get out there to help players and to help people and coaches to maybe help their mindset and get better.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes.
And I'm teaching it's on my required reading for my class at USF, my basketball class. They have to buy the book and do a book report. I had one of Molly's point guards read the book 2 weeks ago. She loved it. It's a book that every coach, every teacher, anybody who's working with kids should, buy it and give it to their kids to read, because it's something that deals with the biggest problem in coaching, and that's egos.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, and that's, again, to Fuscaldo's point. I was surprised to learn also that it was used in some theory of coaching classes, not only locally. I got an email randomly from someone in Ohio who was using it. Again, these things just keep coming to me, and I love to hear it. Inside the book is benchrules@gmail.com, which is where you can get in touch with me if you have any questions or just want to discuss the book.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here today. I know it's always tough to take some time out of the day, especially when there's flies flying around that you got to swat and keep
country living.